Bombshell tonight in the Nolan Wells investigation. Tonight, a Nolan Wells phone evidence torpedo. Good evening. I'm Nancy Grace. This is Crime Stories. I want to thank you for being with us.
Oh, these little liars. I told y'all that Jax was the ringleader. I told y'all. He sat in this interview and he was telling stories about shit that he wasn't even there to witness. So let's break down some of the stuff that I heard in this interview. Let's start with Warren's first phone call, because y'all will remember that Warren said that he was over at Ava's house for that 4th of July party when they all started realizing that Nolan was missing, and he called Miss Christine at 11 o'clock.
One of the first things I told Miss Christine Wells in the first phone call that ever occurred with anything to do with Nolan Wells being gone, because I was the first person to call Miss Christine about anything. First phone call, anything to do with Nolan Wells, was me making a phone call to Christine Wells. And one of the first things I said to her, with multiple witnesses here, pull up the phone call if you want. She said, oh, well, Nolan's location is with y'all at, where the house we were at. And I was like, well, no, he left his phone with us. I told her this.
And yesterday, the same time that this interview came out, Christine Wells said this.
360 says that he's on land, and he was like, well, no, I mean, well, we have his phone.
So both versions of the story say that Warren didn't tell her about the phone until after she confronted him with the 360. Now, Warren tells Miss Christine that he knows somebody in the Coast Guard and that he's going to call them, which is very fucking different than calling the Coast Guard, which absolutely explains why the Coast Guard came out and said at first that they had not received a call from the kids that night. The Coast Guard's initial statement said they weren't informed until 12:30. Then the Coast Guard later changed their story and said, oh wait, actually we did. And it seems to me that that first call was most likely an off the record to a friend kind of deal, which means these people freaked out and didn't call the Coast Guard until after all these people showed up at Jax's house. Which would explain why in the course of this interview it went from Warren called the Coast Guard to we did. Now, when the subject turns to how the family got the phone back from these boys, you'll notice that there was a couple slip-ups.
Warren, you weren't at the house, and so you weren't there when they came to get the phone and all that. So
now remember, Warren just said that he wasn't at the house when the phone was got. And then Morgan talks about getting a phone call from one of the people in Christine Wells' group.
And how did they get the phone back?
So I got a call from a kid we went to high school with. He called me just asking me questions. He saw people posting on Snapchat, like the picture that was circulating.
Except this picture wasn't posted until July 5th. So how could this picture have been circulating on Snapchat that night? But let's continue.
And he called and he was asking questions. He was like, where's Nolan? When's the last time y'all seen him? And then he was like, so where are y'all at? And I told him, I said, we're at Jax's house. And then Warren got on the phone, and I don't know.
So they come to my house, right? And they kind of
hold on before we get there. Was it confrontational or was it just just trying to find? It was confrontational.
Yeah, wouldn't y'all agree?
Yeah,
he was 110%. He was very confrontational.
And when did was this on the night of the 4th or the next day?
This was the night when this was before they came and got the phone.
So this is the night of the 4th, yes.
You guys are missing a part of the story. How did you get from Ava's house to Jax's house? Because Miss Christine is watching you guys on the Life 360. So suddenly she's seeing the phone leave one location and go to another. Of course I would be upset. And now all of a sudden Warren is there when the phone stuff starts happening? He's listening to the phone call? Now I need y'all to remember that Warren also said that the phone was in his truck on the first conversation, as we have from this report. Meaning if we were to believe Warren that he was not there when everybody showed up looking for the phone at some time in between 11 and 1 a.m., so then that would mean after they heard this angry phone call, Warren gets the phone out of his vehicle and puts it in Jack's house and then leaves.
There's probably like 10, 15 people in my house I don't even know. And they're all up in our faces, going crazy, asking where no one is, and we don't know. And finally they get into Wyatt's face, and they're like, where's your boat? Where's the boat at?
Demanding his address.
Demanding his address and stuff like that. And he finally ends up giving it to them. We give them the phone. They have the phone at this point. Then they get the address to his house. Then they go to his house. And they're searching all over his boat, what I heard and stuff like that. Well, anyways, I don't really know much about that, but they come back to my house at around 1 o'clock in the morning. We called law enforcement. I was with Wyatt at the time after we left Jax's house that night. I was with Wyatt, and one person we were with saw that their location was headed towards Wyatt's house. And so Wyatt got on the phone with 911 and was like, hey, these people are on the way to my house or already at my house. My mom and my dad are there alone, and they know nothing about this. But Wyatt's mom actually, when they were looking at the boat, they were actually walking from the boat, and she came out and started talking to them.
Okay, so let me get this straight. Wyatt, Morgan, and Jax were all together. Warren was gone for some reason at this point. 10 to 15 people just barge into your house. Don't know why your grandparents weren't around. That might explain some things, huh? Guess y'all had the house all to your fucking self that weekend. But then they ask Wyatt for his address so that they can go look at the boat. Wyatt gives them the address. They start heading over there. Wyatt and Morgan get into a car and leave Jax's house. Somebody else that you were with that we aren't hearing about is tracking someone else's phone. I don't know if it was somebody who was with the group that they had access to, or if they were tracking Nolan's phone and they saw it was heading to Wyatt's house. And even though Wyatt gave them the address, and instead of calling his parents, he calls 911 and tells them, my parents don't know anything about that's going on. Can you send police over there? Now, mind you, it was about half an hour after being on the phone with Warren that Christine was able to actually call and report him missing. But she was having to go back and forth and go down to all these different agencies because nobody would fucking help her. And frankly, I want to know why all of this confrontation was left out of the fucking report. Like, if this family had to be removed from 2 different properties by the police, why is there no record of that? And in fact, it wasn't until after these confrontations that MDMR and Ocean Springs Police apparently had their little conversations about who was going to be taking over the case. Because remember, the Jackson County Sheriff Lieutenant told them that deputies had spoken with several friends that had traveled to the island on the vessel with Nolan, and that when they were left, he was in the company of an unknown female. So now, even though Warren had supposedly called the Coast Guard, all these family members are telling the police that the kid is missing. These are the people that last saw them. They're all like, we last saw him on the island. Still, the deputies said that they did not have reason to believe that there was any water-related exigencies or emergencies. Don't worry, y'all. I've got a lot fucking more to say about this stuff, so come back for part 2. I'm going to be immediately recording it because Warren fucked up pretty badly in this interview, and I'll show you why. Where we had left off, Warren had already called Miss Christine, and then they somehow ended up at Jax's grandparents' house. That's where they all stayed that weekend, and so that's why Nolan's keys were over there. They had to have been at the grandparents' house, who mysteriously never showed up during any of these confrontations. Somehow the phone had gone from the party that they were all at to Jax's place, and then Warren left after a phone call to Morgan. According to them, 10 to 15 people showed up and just walked into Jax's house and demanded the phone. Wyatt gave the address in which the boat was at. They all start migrating over there. Then Morgan and Wyatt and another friend are tracking their 360s and seeing that they're going over to Wyatt's house. Then they call 911 to tell them that the police are on the way to his house. Then they're searching the boat, and then they come back to Jax's house around 1 o'clock in the morning, according to him. Mind you, that's when they explain to the police about their friend being missing. And so then the report says at 1:38 in the morning, the Jackson County Sheriff's Office say that they spoke to several of the friends that were on the vessel with Nolan, saying that he was in the company of an unknown female. But Morgan, Jax, and Warren all claimed that they did not travel to the island on the same boat as Nolan. So who did they talk to? Because it sounds to me like they had told the police that they were on the same boat as him. Keeping in mind that this is what Warren told Miss Christine.
Named Katie. And so then it turned into, Katie is also missing. No one can find her. And the explanation of no one knows this Katie, like we've never met her.
And Tristan said this.
I was talking on my other buddy's phone, talking to Warren. He was dialing Coast Guard because he hung up the phone and was like, hey, this is them, bye, and hung up the phone. And that was the last time I talked to him.
Mind you, Tristan is friends with Katie. They are mutuals. I have confirmed this. So now that we've got that timeline fucking straight, let's back up to something that Warren said during this interview.
If you're motivated enough to do it, yeah. Like, I made a phone call to my mom, and I had to call her like 8 times before she picked up because either her service was bad because she was on the back side of the aisle on the south side, or my service was bad, and it was just hard to get through.
Do y'all see that? Let me play it again slower for you.
Either her service was bad, she was on the back side of the south side, or my service was bad, and it was just hard to get through.
Oh no. Not only did Warren confirm that his mom was on the south side of the island, but Warren himself said that if you're motivated enough, you can call somebody. I tried calling my mom 8 times. Yet this is what he said last time.
A little off the island, you have cell coverage. And even on the island, like I called my mom when we were on the island, it was fine.
So which is it? Did you call your mom with ease or did you try to call her 8 times because you were motivated to get in touch with her? But Warren wasn't the only one to slip up, because listen.
And he's on the phone with Cito, and he's trying to get them on the phone. And as he stated in the moment, he's like, Cito's just asking all these dumb questions. I can't figure out what's going on. And so finally hangs up. And after the trim to the motor started to work again. So they manually trim it down by the buttons on the motor, trimmed it down, and some electronics started to come back on. And they got the boat to crank over, and they're like, all right, unties.
So first off, Jax just proved that the boys put the phone on mute during the call with Cito, because I've listened to the entire 8-minute call, and at no point did they ever say anything about them asking all these stupid questions. Then he said after they hung up on the Cito, that's when it started working again, and they said, okay, untie us, implying that it had been tied up to the other boat the entire time. But we see in this video that they are hauling the line back in right here as he's on the phone. So you can see right here where the line is being pulled in from across the way where the boat is stationed. Meaning he had already hung up with Cito at that point, and he had to have been on the phone with someone else. And what we see here is, once again, we have an interview where they go into so much detail about stuff that doesn't fucking matter.
Well, I'm gonna go ahead and first off explain a boat.
We fucking get how a bilge pump works. We get it by now. Stop fucking talking about the bilge pump. What we actually want to hear about is the multiple stops that were made before ending up back at the grandparents' house before they even took the boat to the boat dock. We want you guys to explain how the Cito was canceled by the grandfather on the captain's private line before you guys had even hung up with Cito. That's why nobody believes a fucking word that you are saying. Because I showed y'all yesterday how AI had clearly doctored these photos. If you missed it, look, silver pole. Look, no silver pole. It's actually white. And if you look at this picture in the grandparents' driveway of the Triton, you will see that the little handrails are not leaning over. You will see that the rails are going straight up and down and not leaning, which is why I also suspect that the identity of whoever this is was intentionally covered up. Because first off, who wears this weird swimsuit thing? This is somebody who, if they were with them, would have stood out in a crowd. But this woman who's in a red striped swimsuit with a white baseball cap shows up in a lot of different pictures, just oh so obscured. Here she is again, handing out beers on Bart's boat. So I personally suspect that whoever that was in fact on the Triton, and they used AI to change her clothing and to obscure her identity. Because I think this was either Warren's mother or Wyatt's stepmother, which would explain the older female voice people have said they've heard on the Cito. Because otherwise, why would he need to call his mother 8 times? Unless, according to his own words,
If you're motivated enough to do it, yeah.
because remember, there is a 4th boat out there. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Holy fuck, I just accidentally stumbled onto something that literally is concrete proof. Oh my god, next video coming. Oh my god!
Either her service was bad, she was on the back side of the aisle on the south side, or my service was bad, and it was just hard to get through. If you're motivated enough to do it, yeah. I made a phone call to my mom, and I had to call her 8 times before she picked up.
Either her service was bad or my service was bad, and it was just hard to get through. That's Warren Hudson, explaining why he couldn't reach his mother that night. 40 minutes earlier, in the same interview, he said this: I had to call her 8 times before she picked up, if you're motivated enough to do it. Bad service, or 8 calls and motivation, pick one, because those are not the same story, and they're not describing the same phone. Nolan Wells was 18. He went out on the water with people he trusted on the 4th of July. He never came home. And the 4 young men who were with him that day have now given multiple recorded interviews about what happened. Interviews that don't always agree with the video, the location data, or each other. Tonight, we're not telling you what happened to Nolan Wells. We're showing you exactly where 4 stories stop matching up, in their own words, minute by minute. Some of what's ahead involves a missing teenager and a mother still waiting on answers. So if that's a heavy watch tonight, take care of yourself first. If you're staying, drop where you're watching from in the comments. This case has people tracking it from all over the country, and I want to know who's here with us tonight. Here's what's confirmed. GPS shows the boat Nolan was on, the Triton, left Horn Island at roughly 4:30 p.m. Sometime after that, the group realized he wasn't with them. Warren Hudson says he made the first call about it to Nolan's mother, Christine Wells, around 11 p.m. He said this more than once, on tape, with witnesses present. He wants that fact on the record. He called first. But listen to what he actually told her. That Nolan's phone was with the group, not where it was, just that they had it. Christine has said publicly that she didn't get a location until she checked Life 360 herself and told Warren what it showed. The phone wasn't on the island. It wasn't on the water. It was on land. That's the moment a mother stopped trusting the story and started checking it herself. After that, Warren told Christine he knew someone in the Coast Guard and would reach out. Knowing someone in the Coast Guard and calling the Coast Guard are 2 different acts. One is a favor to a friend. The other opens an official file with a timestamp. That distinction matters, because the Coast Guard's first public statement said no call came in that night. Days later, that statement changed. A call was logged at 12:30 a.m., 90 minutes. That's the gap between Warren's 11 p.m. call and the official 12:30 a.m. record. If the first call really did go to a friend and not a dispatcher, that gap explains itself. It also means the clock on this investigation may not have started when the family thinks it did. Here's where it gets harder to explain away. The group's account of that night includes a mechanical failure, a bilge pump issue, a call to the Coast Guard, and then, right as the call ends, the electronics coming back online. One of them describes it this way. The power came back, and they told each other to untie. Untie from what? If they were alone on the water, there's nothing to untie from. There's footage from that night showing a tow line being hauled in, from a second boat, back toward the Triton. Line that footage up against the timeline, and the tow line is coming in while they were still telling the Coast Guard they were disabled and alone. Not after the call, during it. That means there was a second boat close enough to be physically tied to theirs. At the exact moment, 4 people were describing themselves as stranded by themselves. Nobody in the original account says who was on it. Back to that phone Christine was tracking. By the group's own account, it started at the house where they'd gathered. Then it moved to a second location. Then toward a boat dock. Then back again, close to 1 a.m. Warren says he wasn't even there for part of that. So if he's telling the truth, who moved it and why, during the exact hours his friends were telling a mother everything was fine? Christine wasn't guessing when she got upset. She was watching a dot travel between places nobody had explained to her, while her son stayed unaccounted for. Around 1 a.m., 10 to 15 people, family and friends of Nolan's, alarmed by what they were seeing on Life 360, showed up at the house where the boys were staying. One of them, Wyatt, ended up giving out the address of the boat dock. Some of the group headed there. Here's the beat worth sitting with. When Wyatt realized people were heading toward his house, he didn't call his parents to warn them. He called 911 to report that a group was on its way there. Read that again. A teenage boy is missing. His friend's first 911 call of the night isn't about finding him. It's about people showing up at a door. 2 completely different instincts were running in that house that night. One side was searching for Nolan. The other was managing who was arriving next. Buried in the same night paperwork is one more line. Deputies wrote that they'd spoken with friends who'd been on the water with Nolan, who told them he was last seen with an unfamiliar woman. Warren, Jax, Wyatt, and Morgan have all said, on record, that none of them were on Nolan's boat that day. So if none of them were with him, who told deputies about the woman? That detail is sitting in an official report, and right now, nobody's name is attached to it. This is the part families in cases like this dread most, so let's slow down on what it actually means. When investigators finally get access to a phone like Nolan's, they're not just unlocking a screen. Specialists extract a full copy of everything on the device: messages, deleted messages, location history, and even data someone thinks is gone for good is often still recoverable, because deleting a file usually just marks the space as free, not erased, until something else eventually writes over it. That's why Nolan's family pushed to have an independent expert present for the extraction, instead of one side handling it alone. Not because they don't trust an outcome, because if that phone is mishandled even once, there's no second chance to get it right. For a family that's already lost their son, that device may be one of the last places his voice, his last messages, his last movements still exist. They want to make sure nothing on it is lost twice. If you want to be here for what that phone reveals, subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss it the moment it's confirmed. And while you're down there, still let me know where you're watching from tonight. It genuinely helps us know who's following this with us. Right now, this hasn't been formally classified as a criminal investigation, but a grand jury process is moving forward. Nolan's family has said, repeatedly, that they're willing to hand over the phone, on the condition an independent expert is in the room when it's opened. 4 young men have now spoken publicly, more than once, about what happened that day. Their accounts don't fully match the video. They don't fully match the location data. And in at least one case, one of them doesn't fully match himself, inside the same interview. None of that tells us what happened to Nolan Wells. It tells us the story we've been given so far isn't finished. Nolan's mother is still asking the questions you're asking right now. We're going to keep asking with her, and we'll be back the moment there's something real to report, not before. If this is the kind of case you want us tracking for you, subscribe so you don't miss the next update, and tell us one more time in the comments where you're watching from tonight. We read every one.